Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I come before you today with a message that is urgent, a message that burns within my soul. There are moments in history when God calls a generation to stand firm, to resist the temptation of compromise, to hold the line of righteousness. We are living in such a time. You who are chosen, you who have been set apart, you must hear this word. God is angry. Don't do it, no matter the gain. We live in a world where men have exchanged truth for lies, where they have traded integrity for influence, and where the pursuit of temporary success has led many to forsake eternal purpose. But let me warn you, what profits a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What is the value of wealth, status, or the approval of men if it costs you the favor of God? You were not created for mediocrity. You were not designed to blend in with corruption. You were chosen to be different. And when God chooses a man or a woman, he sets them apart for a holy purpose. But with that calling comes a responsibility, a weight, a divine standard that cannot be ignored. Promise is the silent destroyer of destiny. It does not announce itself with a loud warning. It comes subtly, dressed in opportunity, wrapped in the illusion of progress and disguised as wisdom. It whispers that a little bending of the rules won't hurt, that a small deviation from truth is necessary for survival, that God will understand because the end justifies the means. But make no mistake, compromise is the seed of destruction, the doorway to downfall, and the quickest way to forfeit the favor of God. The most dangerous thing about compromise is that it never demands everything at once. It asks for just a small adjustment, just a little shift, just a moment of leniency. And with each step taken, the conviction that once burned so brightly begins to dim. What was once unacceptable becomes tolerable. What was once resisted becomes embraced, and before one realizes it, the line of righteousness has been erased. Destiny is never lost in a single moment. It fades through a series of small, seemingly insignificant decisions. Compromise is always justified in the mind before it manifests in action. The enemy will never tempt you with blatant rebellion. He will tempt you with reasoning. He will convince you that playing by the rules is too costly, that standing firm will cause you to lose opportunities, that everyone else is doing it and succeeding. He will remind you of others who took shortcuts and still seem to be thriving. And if you listen to that voice long enough, you will start questioning the very convictions that once defined you. But hear this, what you compromise to gain, you will eventually lose. If you sacrifice integrity for influence, the influence will crumble. If you trade obedience for opportunity, the opportunity will turn to dust. If you choose temporary pleasure over eternal purpose, the pleasure will fade and leave you empty. God cannot bless what is built on compromise. He cannot sustain what was birthed in disobedience. And though it may seem for a season that you have gained, in the end it will cost far more than you were ever willing to pay. Every great man or woman who fell did not fall in a single day. It began with a decision that seemed harmless. A leader who once stood for truth begins to make small exceptions. A businessman with strong morals starts cutting minor corners. A believer who once walked in purity begins entertaining thoughts that once would have been dismissed. And slowly, the foundation of character begins to crack. The cracks are invisible at first, but in time they widen until everything collapses. Do not be deceived. Compromise will always come dressed as an advantage. It will always appear to be a shortcut to success, a strategic move, a way to get ahead. But God does not bless shortcuts. He blesses obedience. What He has for you does not require deception, manipulation, or dishonesty. If you have to lie to get it, it's not from Him. If you have to betray your values to attain it, He did not send it. If it requires secrecy, shame, or deception, then it is a trap, not a blessing. Stand firm in the face of temptation. Do not allow temporary desires to cost you eternal purpose. The pressure to compromise will come sometimes from those closest to you, sometimes from those in power, and sometimes from within yourself. But when that moment arrives, you must decide whom you will serve: God or gain, destiny or deception, purpose or pleasure. Because one thing is certain: compromise always asks for more than it promised. It will take you further than you wanted to go, keep you longer than you intended to stay, and cost you more than you were willing to pay. And by the time you realize the price, it will be too late to undo the damage. Guard your integrity, protect your convictions, resist the temptation to trade your calling for convenience. No gain in this world is worth losing what God has placed on your life. To be chosen by God is not a privilege without responsibility. It is a call to be tested, refined, and proven. Every man or woman whom God has ever called was not simply appointed, they were tested. Their assignment was not handed to them without a price. The weight of their purpose was measured by the fire they endured. Because God does not send untested vessels into battle, and He does not entrust great things to those who have not been proven in the furnace of trials. The test of the chosen is not an obstacle, it is a necessity. It is the process that separates the ones who are merely interested from the ones who are truly committed. It is the refining fire that removes impurities, the storm that exposes weakness, the pressure that reveals character. Many want the promise, but few are willing to endure the process. Many desire the crown, but few are willing to carry the cross. Yet, until you pass the test, you cannot walk in the fullness of what God has for you. When God chooses a man, He allows him to be tested in the very area where his calling will be established. If you're called to leadership, you will be tested in submission. If you're called to wealth, you will be tested in stewardship. If you're called to influence, you will be tested in humility. If you're called to stand for truth, you will be tested in compromise. Every calling comes with a test, and the greater the assignment, the greater the test. The test of the chosen is not always obvious. It does not always come as a crisis or an attack. Sometimes it comes as an opportunity to take a shortcut, an opportunity to please people rather than obey God, an opportunity to gain at the cost of integrity. This is why so many fail, not because they did not have the strength to endure hardship, but because they did not have the discernment to recognize when the test was disguised as a blessing. Joseph was tested with betrayal, slavery, and false accusation before he was entrusted with ruling a nation. Moses was tested with rejection, exile, and wilderness before he was given the authority to lead God's people. David was tested with obscurity, persecution, and waiting before he was crowned as king. Even Jesus was tested in the wilderness before he stepped into his public ministry. If the Son of God himself had to be tested, what makes you think you will be exempt? The test of the chosen is designed to prepare you for what is ahead. It is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to refine you. It exposes what is hidden, strengthens what is weak, and uproots what does not belong. God will allow you to be tested, not because He is punishing you, but because He is preparing you. And until you pass the test, you cannot move to the next level. Many have forfeited their destiny because they tried to avoid the test. They found an easier way. They chose comfort over calling. They refused to endure the process. And as a result, they were never qualified to carry the weight of their purpose. Because what God has for you is not cheap. The anointing you desire is costly. The influence you seek carries responsibility. And if you are not willing to be tested, you are not ready to be trusted. The chosen must be tested in the secret place before they can be revealed in the public place. You must pass in private before you can be elevated in public. What you do when no one is watching will determine whether God can trust you when everyone is watching. What you endure in the wilderness will determine whether you can handle the weight of the promise. So when the test comes, do not despise it. Do not run from it. Do not try to escape it. Stand in it. Pass it. Let God prove you, refine you, and make you into what He has called you to be. Because until you are tested, you are not yet ready. The greatest weapon of the enemy is not force, it is deception. He does not come with chains, he comes with lies. He does not attack with swords, he attacks with illusions. Because he knows that a man who is deceived will destroy himself. A man who believes a lie will walk willingly into captivity, thinking he is free. And this is why the enemy's greatest strategy is not to fight you, but to convince you that there is no fight at all. Deception is powerful because it does not appear as evil, it appears as wisdom. It does not present itself as rebellion, it presents itself as a reasonable choice. The enemy will never tell you to walk away from God directly. He will simply suggest that there is another way. He will not tell you to abandon your purpose. He will just convince you to delay it. He will not command you to sin outright. He will justify why it is necessary. And before you realize it, you have moved far from the truth, thinking you are still standing in it. The first deception in history did not come through force. It came through a question. Did God really say? The enemy did not attack Eve with a weapon. He attacked her with doubt. He made her question what she knew to be true. He made her believe that there was something better outside of obedience. And the same deception continues today. He will whisper into your mind, making you question the very convictions God placed in your heart. Deception works because it feeds the desires already in you. The enemy cannot tempt you with something you do not want. He studies your weaknesses, your cravings, your ambitions, and then presents a lie that fits perfectly. He will not tempt a man who loves truth with obvious falsehood, but he will twist the truth just enough to make it more convenient. He will not tempt a faithful servant with open rebellion, but he will convince them to prioritize work over worship, service over intimacy with God. And without realizing it, they will be distracted, distant, and disconnected from the very one they were called to serve. The enemy does not need to stop you. He only needs to mislead you. If he can make you believe that you are walking in the right direction while slowly guiding you off course, then he has already won. Because the most dangerous deception is the one that looks like truth. The most effective lie is the one mixed with just enough truth to make it believable. And this is why discernment is necessary. Because deception does not always come in the form of sin. Sometimes it comes in the form of an opportunity that looks like a blessing, but is actually a trap. Many have been deceived, not because they were weak, but because they were unaware. They thought they were making a wise decision only to find themselves bound. They thought they were securing their future only to realize they had forfeited their purpose. Because the enemy does not tell you the price of deception up front. He does not show you the consequences. He only reveals the benefits, the immediate pleasure, the temporary advantage. And by the time you see the cost, you are already entangled. Deception does not happen overnight. It happens gradually. One small compromise, one little justification, one slight adjustment to the truth, and soon what was once clear becomes blurred. What was once non-negotiable becomes optional. And before long, the foundation of righteousness has shifted, and the soul is lost in confusion. This is why you must stay anchored in truth, because deception can only take root where there is ignorance. It can only thrive where there is a lack of discernment. The only defense against the enemy's lies is the unshakable knowledge of God's truth. The only way to overcome deception is to refuse to entertain anything that contradicts what God has spoken. If it contradicts His word, it is a lie. If it requires you to compromise, it is a trap. If it leads you away from His presence, it is not from Him. Be alert, be vigilant, because the enemy is not coming for your money, your possessions, or your reputation. He is coming for your mind. And if he can plant a lie, he can control your destiny. Integrity is the foundation upon which true greatness is built. Influence may elevate a man, but only integrity can sustain him. The world celebrates those who rise quickly, those who gain power, those who accumulate followers. But heaven is not impressed by the size of a platform. It is concerned with the strength of the character that holds it up. Because influence without integrity is a house without a foundation, a throne without authority, a flame that burns bright but quickly fades into nothing. The temptation to choose influence over integrity is one that every leader, every chosen one, every person with a divine assignment will face. The desire to be accepted, to be applauded, to be recognized can become so strong that it blinds men to the cost of compromise. It makes them believe that success justifies the means, that as long as they have the crowd, they have the calling. But what good is it to stand before thousands if God is no longer standing with you? What good is a kingdom that was built on deception? Influence can be gained in many ways, but true authority comes only from righteousness. The world has its systems, its shortcuts, its strategies for advancement. It teaches that power belongs to those who know how to manipulate, that success comes to those who are willing to bend the rules. But influence that is gained through dishonesty will always crumble under the weight of truth. A man who builds his reputation on lies will one day be exposed. A leader who climbs the ladder by stepping on others will eventually fall, because whatever is gained outside of God's principles cannot be sustained by his power. Integrity is not popular. It will cost you. It may cost you opportunities, relationships, invitations, and applause. It may mean losing deals, losing positions, losing connections. Because in a world where men trade truth for influence, standing for righteousness will often mean standing alone. But do not be deceived. What is built on integrity will last. The man who chooses truth over temporary success may seem to be falling behind, but in time, God will lift him higher than any man could ever place him. Every great leader has faced the test of integrity. There will always come a moment when you must decide, will I do what is right even if it costs me? Will I refuse to bow even if it delays my promotion? Will I speak truth even if it makes me unpopular? This is the test that separates those who are used by God from those who are used by men. Because God does not measure success by influence. The true mark of integrity is what you do when no one is watching. It is the decisions you make in private, the deals you refuse in secret, the standards you uphold when no one will ever know. Influence can be a mask, but integrity is the reality behind the mask. Influence can be staged, but integrity is revealed in the moments when the stage is empty. And God is watching. Not the performance, not the presentation, but the heart. The danger of seeking influence over integrity is that influence is fleeting. One day the crowd is cheering, the next they have found someone new. One day men are applauding, the next they have turned away. But integrity remains. Long after influence fades, long after positions are lost, long after the crowd has moved on, a man of integrity will still be standing, unshaken, unmoved, secure in the approval of God. If you have to lie to get it, it's not from God. If you have to betray your convictions to keep it, it was never yours to begin with. Influence that requires compromise is influence that is destined to fail. But integrity will take you where influence never could. Integrity will open doors that men tried to shut. Integrity will secure favor that manipulation could never achieve. Integrity will establish what deception could only imitate. Choose integrity, no matter the cost. Because in the end, when influence is gone, when applause has faded, when the stage is empty, integrity is the only thing that will remain. Obedience is the true test of faith. It is not proven in comfort, nor is it revealed in convenience. Obedience is costly. It demands sacrifice. It requires surrender. And though many desire the rewards of obedience, few are willing to pay the price. Because the call to obey God will always challenge the desires of the flesh, contradict the logic of man, and separate those who are truly committed. from those who are merely interested. When God gives an instruction, it is never to make life easy, it is to make life purposeful. He does not call men to obey because it is the simplest path. He calls them to obey because it is the only path that leads to destiny. But every instruction from heaven comes with a price on earth. It may cost you relationships. It may cost you opportunities. It may cost you comfort, reputation, or the approval of those around you. Because obedience will always set you apart. It will make you different. It will make you misunderstood. And it will force you to choose between pleasing God and pleasing men. The cost of obedience is often loneliness. There will be times when you must walk away from what is familiar, when you must leave behind what is comfortable, when you must let go of people who are not willing to walk the path God has called you to walk. Abraham had to leave his homeland without knowing where he was going. Moses had to leave Pharaoh's palace to suffer with God's people. Jesus himself had to withdraw to lonely places to stay connected to the Father. Because obedience will always separate you before it elevates you. It will pull you away from what is temporary so that you can step into what is eternal. Obedience will cost you control. To obey God means to surrender your plans, your timeline, your expectations. It means saying yes even when the details are unclear, even when the future is uncertain, even when the road ahead looks impossible. It means trusting His wisdom over your understanding, His timing over your impatience, His ways over your desires. And this is where many struggle. Not because they don't love God, but because they do not want to let go of their own plans. But obedience requires surrender, and surrender requires trust. Because God will never reveal the next step until you take the first one in faith. The cost of obedience is often rejection. When you choose to follow God, you will lose the approval of people who do not understand your calling. When you choose to stand for truth, you will offend those who are comfortable with compromise. When you choose to walk in righteousness, you will expose the darkness in others. And there will be those who resent you, who criticize you, who oppose you, not because you have wronged them, but because your obedience convicts them. But do not be discouraged, because the approval of man is temporary, but the reward of obedience is eternal. Obedience will cost you time. The process of God is never rushed. He develops character before He releases influence. He builds faith before He opens doors. He tests the heart before He elevates the man. And if you are not willing to wait, you are not ready to walk in the fullness of what He has for you. Because obedience is not just about saying yes. It is about saying yes and staying faithful even when it takes longer than expected. Even when it seems like nothing is happening. Even when it feels like others are advancing while you are being left behind. Because what God is preparing for you requires patience. And if you rush ahead of Him, you will miss what He has already set in place for you. The cost of obedience is real. It will stretch you. It will break you. It will test you. But in the end, it will be worth it. Because while disobedience may offer temporary pleasure, it always leads to permanent regret. But obedience, though painful in the moment, will always produce eternal reward. God is not looking for those who are willing to obey when it is easy. He is looking for those who will obey no matter the cost. There comes a time in every believer's life when they must decide whether they will stand or fall. Whether they will remain firm in the truth or bow to the pressures of the world. Whether they will hold on to their convictions or compromise for the sake of comfort. Because the call to follow God is not a call to convenience. It is a call to endurance. It is a call to remain unshaken when everything around you is shifting. To hold on to truth when lies are celebrated. To stand firm when the cost of standing seems too great. The battle is not always obvious. It does not always come with threats or persecution. Sometimes it comes with subtle pressure, with silent compromise, with the temptation to blend in rather than stand out. It comes through the fear of rejection, the fear of losing opportunities, the fear of being misunderstood. And this is where many fall, not because they intended to, but because they were not prepared. They did not realize that the greatest battles are not fought with swords, but with convictions. The greatest victories are not won on battlefields, but in decisions made in secret. To stand firm is to refuse to bow no matter the cost. It is to remain unmoved when culture shifts, to stay anchored when the waves of deception rise, to speak truth even when silence would be easier, because the world will always push against righteousness. It will always demand that truth be watered down, that holiness be redefined, that principles be adjusted to fit popular opinion. And many will fall, not because they lack faith, but because they lack the courage to stand. The call to stand firm is not a suggestion, it is a command. It is not an option for the chosen, it is the requirement. Because faith that cannot withstand pressure is not faith at all. Convictions that collapse under opposition were never truly convictions. And a foundation that crumbles in the storm was never built on truth. God is not looking for those who will stand when it is easy. He is looking for those who will stand when it costs them everything. Standing firm means refusing to be moved by circumstances. It means holding on to God's promises even when everything around you says otherwise. It means declaring victory even when defeat seems certain. Because faith is not proven in times of peace. It is revealed in times of war. And if you cannot stand in the storm, you were never truly standing to begin with. There will always be opposition. There will always be voices that tell you to let go, to give in, to compromise just a little. There will always be people who mock your convictions, who call you foolish for holding on to what they have let go of. And the temptation will always be there to take the easy road, to choose the path of least resistance, to trade faithfulness for acceptance. But you must decide now before the test comes that you will not be moved. Because if you wait until the pressure is upon you, it will be too late to make your decision. Standing firm is not about physical strength. It is about spiritual resilience. It is about knowing in whom you have believed, about being so rooted in God's word that no lie can shake you, no attack can weaken you, no storm can uproot you. Because when you are anchored in truth, you do not fear the winds of deception. When you are secured in God's promises, you are not threatened by temporary setback. And when you know who you are in Christ, you do not seek validation from men. The call to stand firm is not just for a season, it is for a lifetime. It is not just for moments of crisis, it is for every day, every decision, every battle, seen and unseen. Because the enemy does not stop, the pressures do not fade, the challenges do not disappear. But those who endure to the end will receive the reward. Those who refuse to bow will see the fulfillment of God's promises. Those who stand firm will not be forgotten. And though the road may be lonely, though the cost may be high, though the pressure may be great, those who stand will stand in victory. Because in the end, it is not the ones who started strong that matter. It is the ones who refused to fall. May God strengthen you. May you have the courage to say no, no matter the gain. God bless you.